Certainly. Yeah, I appreciate everybody coming on today, and it's nice to be able to talk about baseball, actually playing games, not the theory of it. So that's always a nice adjustment. No, we're excited and ready to go. I don't know if we're ready to play, but the season's here, and so we're gonna go play the games. But no, I appreciate it. I hope everybody's doing well and safe and healthy, and excited to get going.
All right. If you guys want to have a question for Coach Mercer, just let me know in the chat, or you can use the raise your hand feature. We'll go ahead and start off with John Blau, and then we'll head over to Tom Brew.
You talk about not knowing yet if you're ready to play. I mean, how do you feel like the guys are going to handle the emotions of, getting back out in the field after, this long break and having a season, cut short the way it was last year? I mean, how do you feel like you're prepared to handle kind of the mental aspect of being back out there?
That's the $1 million question, right? That's the one that we've, as a staff, have spent a lot of time with. And anytime when you play the spring sport where you wait all year to begin with, like the 3 or 4 weeks leading up to the season is just like everyone's on edge and everyone's cranky and everyone's a little bit like emotional and it's like, golly, we just need to go play. Well, then exacerbate that with everything else that's going on this past year and now the rest of the college baseball is played, and it's just that part has been a major part. I think we'll be fine. I do. I think we'll be fine. I think once we kind of get there and settle in and take BP on the field and do those things, I think we'll be fine. But it'll be a challenge. It'll be a challenge, as it is with every team every year. But it will certainly be a challenge for these guys. I know that we've worked hard to prepare for that from an emotional standpoint. I've been really firm with the kids this year. I'm always firm with them, but this year more so than ever before, just trying to prepare them for the rigors of what's coming and how to handle this and how to manage it, and trying very much to stay neutral, right? Where it's like, we don't need to be negative because it's not going to solve any problems and pessimistic, but we also can't lie and be like a false sense of positivity when it's hard. Like, we have to be able to control ourselves and stay neutral and move forward from there. But no, you're right. It's going to be a real challenge. I think they'll be fine. I think once we start, it'll be fine. We can kind of stop fighting each other and kind of go fight somebody else and compete against somebody else and have fun with it, hopefully.
We're going to Tom and then Austin Render.
Jeff, obviously, this is such a strange year, too, with so many guys were able to come back, from last year after unfinished business and such. With this sort of shortened, condensed season, too, I mean, how are you trying to deal with all of trying to get playing time for as many people as possible and trying to figure all that out?
It's a challenge. I mean, it's a challenge. We talked with the kids about it being it's a sprint, but it's still a marathon. Most seasons are a marathon where you're trying to get your team ready for the last month. And that's the nice thing about being in our conference, our position, is we're going to be able to have the RPI on a normal year to be able to be in the conversation and make the tournament, the postseason tournament, without having to win every game up front, where you're able to play a little bit of, I don't want to say musical chairs, but a little bit of it. You're trying to find the right role in the right place for everybody and get the right lineup. And then once you get the right lineup, you try to I'm a firm believer, like I hit fourth. I hit fourth every day. That's what I do. I hit fourth. I know my job. I know my role. I like that. I think people like that. And if we can stop the musical chairs at a certain point, allows everyone to settle in and do their job. And that's normally how we'll operate, knowing that we'll have the RPI to be able to make the tournament. And then we still want to be our best version of our team in the last month. Well, now it's like we need to be the best version of ourselves today and still plan on being the best that we can at the end of the season. So it's difficult. I'm not going to lie and act like it's not a challenge. It's something that we talk about. We talk about a ton. We have a great coaching staff, and I love those guys. But if I sat in one more meeting talking about that piece, I'm gonna lose even more hair than I have. But it's a challenge. What we have to be able to do is we individually, or me as a player, to be able to control the things I can control and focus on the role that I have today, because we have to be able to play the lineup that gives us a chance to win. But there's a different piece to that, where from a managerial standpoint with the depth in the condensed season is you have to be able to play the lineup that plays defense late. You have to be able to match guys up, and you have to treat it much more like a playoff, like a big league playoff, than you do, I think, a normal college season where you don't see a lot of the moving and shaking through a lineup. And so you have to put guys in a position to be successful, and then they have to accept that role momentarily while also still striving to have a bigger role, which they all want to have. And so trying to not disallow those guys from wanting a bigger role, but showing them how to get a bigger role. It's like if your job is to be the defensive replacement and you come in and make 2 errors, then you don't have the role that you previously had, and now you have less of a role. If you come in and you're the guy who comes off the bench to lay a sack bunt down, and you get a sack bunt on, you might get a pinch hit. If you can pinch hit, then you get to maybe DH. If you get a DH, maybe you can be an everyday guy. But you got to do what you got to be able to control and succeed and perform in the role that you have to be able to have a bigger role. And showing those guys a path forward, I think, is really important for how do you manage the mentality of that whole group. So it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a struggle. We're still going to try to be good stewards of kids' careers, where if you don't feel like a guy is going to be an everyday or an every other day contributor, they need to redshirt, and we'll utilize that when we need to. There was nothing more frustrating for me as a player than to watch coaches that weren't good stewards of players' careers who just use a year of eligibility haphazardly, and we'll always do our best to not do that to a kid.
Austin, and then Eric Bremer.
Coach, it has to be nice in such a weird year to have so many experienced guys in both your rotation and your lineup. Who have you seen kind of emerge as a leader through the offseason?
I think the first guy that really comes to mind for me is Cole Barr. I think he's been terrific. His lifestyle, his diet, nutrition, the weight room, his physical development, his emotional stability in a really tumultuous time. He's just really grown, and not that he was ever bad, but he's just become a young man. Like he's a young man, and it's been really nice to see overall. He and Tommy Summer, I would say, on the pitching staff, on the pitching side, he's a professional. He's a worker, and he's a professional, and he can communicate, and he's articulate, and he has his own opinions, and his opinions are grounded and based in the research he's done, and those things they carry over. And so I would say probably those 2 guys as far as their growth and understanding and how they impact the club in an overall positive way. And there's a multitude of other guys as well, but you look at Drew Ashley and Grant Richardson's a really good leader, and then McCade Brown's done a really nice job. He's really asserted himself and grown up a ton, and so we're fortunate in that regard. You're right. Where the positive side of this is the negative side of losing the season last year is especially as a newer coaching staff, you're trying to show how you would like to play the game. This is how it worked. This is how I want to play. This is the mentality. And so often the winning of a season helps to show that, but the losing of a season helps that mostly. It's like, hey, I know we talk about this, but this is why we have to do it this way. And the losing helps more than the winning in that regard. Well, when the season's lost, you lose obviously all that humility. You lose the ability to show those moments and learn from them. And so having the positive side of that, where the draft is shortened and guys coming back for an additional year, is those guys can now communicate in your locker room, and you hope that they do. And I think our guys have. So hopefully we won't have as many growing pains as you would normally have over the course of a season because those guys have returned.
Eric Bremer, and then we'll go back to John Blau.
Hey, Coach, how stretched out is your pitching staff this year in comparison to a normal week before opening day? And is there any concern about, innings limits or anything like that on the back end of the season, given that your players not only didn't have most of a collegiate season, but also didn't have a summer collegiate season either?
That's an awesome question. Our guys are further along than they would normally be. We've been able to get up to 5 and 6 innings for those starters in a practice setting, which is a lot, especially when you have hour limitations. There's just only so many hours you're allowed to practice. So we want to get those guys worked up. I feel like we'll be at 100 pitches or so, 90 to 100 pitches, depending upon the guy. as we go into the season. So it really puts us in a better position that way to be able to work them up without having to work them up in the course of the season. You know, normally you're at 60 or 70 pitches and you got 5 innings or 4 innings maybe for a starter. Now all of a sudden you're trying to cover a bunch of innings and guys that aren't ready, and you end up ruining a lot of guys' confidence in a really poor setting situation. As obviously as you know, the not having innings last year hurt the staff in the fall. I'll be honest. Like the hitters were much further ahead than our pitchers this past fall because they didn't have the spring. Mostly didn't have the physical training. A lot of those guys were big physical young kids that need to be in the weight room, need to be with on throwing programs. And when the shutdown happened, the hitters can go off the machine and hit. You can go get BP. You can get that kind of stuff in. The pitchers, they're just down, or they're throwing once a week in a league and not the same. Velocities were down and stuff was down, and some ticky-tack injuries here and there. And so what we really focused on through that was we've got to get these guys back into the weight room. We've got to get them physically where they're capable of just handling that workload. And I would say about a month ago, you could see that 3 or 4 months of real investment, of taking a step back, reassessing and making some adjustments. You could see it start to go. And the pitching staff has been terrific. And the roles have kind of reversed, which is what I told the pitchers and the hitters in the fall. You know, in the fall, it's like, well, you know, we're struggling to pitch and our offense is some juggernaut. And I'm like, well, let's just wait, because at some point in time, it'll be the we can't hit it all, and our pitching staff is unhittable. And that's not the reality either, right? So the kind of like water finds its balance, but the pitching staff has been really good. The velocities have been up. The off-speed stuff has been really good. You're exactly right. That was a huge balancing act this fall and on off season, was not having a season, very, very limited summer ball, and the shutdowns really damaged the progress of the pitchers. And I gave the hitters a false sense of probably where they were at. And then the roles have kind of reversed as we've gotten into the spring. But they should be fine. We should be fine where we're at now. I think the physicalities has replaced where it needed to be at. I don't see any issues with the back end of the season. I think we're deep enough and strong enough on the mound to cover the innings without having to stretch guys too much. The big question for me is, or concern is, you have a couple bullpen arms that you really like, and it's like you just go to that well. It's like Braden Scott. Like if Braden Scott could throw every game, like he'd throw every game. Like I'm just like, give it to Braden Scott. He's the adult in the room. But you can't do that because you look up after 3 weeks and Braden Scott's got 12 appearances, and you're like, we got a problem. Like you can't have 40 appearances this year. So that's the issue you have to manage and make sure that you're growing that trusted bullpen room, because there was a time that Braden Scott wasn't in that room until he was, and he got in that room by getting out there and screwing up and then getting better and better and improving. But I think we'll be fine. I don't look at it as an issue. I think those guys, honestly, college baseball, this is the optimist in me. You know, the March 5th start date is about where college baseball should start, or a week later in general. Just looking at the way that, like, we weren't ready to play 2 weeks ago. No one's ready to play 2 weeks ago. You look across the country, how many arm injuries have you already had? It's like real prospects, a bunch. And we could have been in that similar position. There were some guys that were still nicked up and not ready to go. So the blessing and the curse of this is we are more physically prepared than we would have been 2 weeks ago. And I'm glad we had that time.
John, Tom, and then we'll go to Jared Rigdon.
You already asked kind of about the depth of this team, and obviously a lot of veteran returners, but are there any, underclassmen, newcomers, like freshmen, sophomores that have impressed that, maybe could really push their way in?
Paul Tates is a really fine player. He's a really competitive, intense kid. He reminds me of, I've told him this, he reminds me of a kid we had at Wright State, kid named Matt Morrow, who was a terrific player, played pro ball for a little bit, and has a great offensive feel, a strong-handed kid, is a good defender. He's going to have to control his emotions. He wants to go now, right? He's a fighter, and so he's going to have to control himself. But he's a really good young one. Sam Murison is a young outfielder from Florida that has really done a good job. He's been really good. He's a smart player. He's a heady player, puts the ball in play. Plus, he's a really, really good defender, a good runner, has really made a strong push out of that young group. From a transfer standpoint, Jacob Southern from Jacksonville has been really good. He's a really talented player. He's a really talented offensive player. I know his offensive numbers in his career haven't been overwhelming, but he's a really talented offensive player. Had a little bit of arm stuff last year, nothing serious as a catcher, but has gotten back. I mean, he can really throw. Like there's not many catchers that you look at and it's like he changes the game in the way that he throws. And he's a guy that can really throw, can really transfer, can really throw. And in that regard, in the right situation, in the right setting, as you guys know, you play a certain style of team, you play a Louisville. Louisville's going to run. They're going to run. So having a guy like that in your back pocket can really alter the course of the game in the season. So I would say those three guys, two newcomers. Although Paul is a redshirt freshman, but he was hurt last year, and Sam, and then Jacob as far as a transfer. Those three guys have been really good.
Tom, and then Jared.
Jeff, you got rotation plans set up for the starters?
Yeah, we'll go. Gabe will go against Rutgers the first game. Tommy's going the second game against Minnesota. McCade's going the third game against Rutgers, and Ty Bothwell's going the fourth game against Minnesota.
All right, and what have you seen from Ty that during this offseason? I know he had such a good summer you were happy with, and also give me an update on Connor Madison, how he's doing.
Connor's doing great. Connor's back. Honestly, I was really surprised at how quickly he recovered and was back. His last outing, he was 89, 91 with obviously his trademark curveball, which is still really good. The velocity was back faster than I thought. We even slowed him down once or twice. He's like ready to go. I'm like, I'm fine, I'm ready to go. It's like, let's just give it another couple of days, and didn't really have any setbacks. So he's back and ready to go, which is terrific. Ty just has a fastball that it's just difficult to hit. You look at the metrics of it. I think it's probably a release point, a release height and distance kind of thing, not necessarily a spin rate thing. It's just a tough fastball to hit. And for a hitting coach that prides himself on teaching an offense to be able to hit a fastball and valuing hitting a fastball, it's hard for us to square it up, especially early for the first three or four innings, 5 innings. Now he's not he's not the tallest guy, and he's a strong kid, but he's going to have to manage. Can he get him into the 5th, 6th, 7th? Can he hold the stuff into that range? But the fastball, it just really plays up. And the slide of the breaking ball is really good. He can really spin it too, and he has a nice pickoff move, especially if you haven't seen it. He's got a really nice pickoff move. Can handle the run game. He's a good athlete. He's done it. He would have done it last year had we finished the season. He got a chance to get his feet under him. He would have been an impactful guy last year, but he's done it in summer ball. He's done it in summer ball for 2 summers in a row, and had a bunch of strikeouts, a bunch of success, and has whipped our hitters' butts a lot this year. And I think he's going to be great. I think he'll be great.
All right, we've got 3 more. Jared, then Eric, and then wrap up with Austin.
A little bit more on the rotation, Coach. McCade is a guy that's taken some serious growth over his first couple of years here. Is that a guy that you're comfortable and ready to see become a legitimate, weekend starter in your rotation this year?
Yeah, I've got complete confidence in Mac. He's done nothing but gone out and worked and performed this year. I wish you guys would be allowed to practice, but he's been outstanding. Manages situations, manages emotions, throws a fastball for a strike, and locates it. Not just I just poured in there at 95 north somewhere. I mean, this guy that can locate side to side and get up and get down and do what he needs to do. And his curveball is a plus pitch. Sliders are plus pitch. Changeup's a developing. It's a good pitch. I like it. But no, I feel really good about him because he feels really good about himself. And you just see that in the body language. In the body language, you can look in the guy's eye. You can see the guy the way he walks around the clubhouse. You can see the way he takes the mound. You can see the way he throws his bullpens. When a guy is ready, a guy's there. You can see it, and you can feel it, and he's there, and he's ready to roll. And I think getting guys to be able to understand that if you want to have confidence and you want to have trust, it's in the work that you put in. You can't, like, I can't give it to you. I can bring you into the office and I can pat you on the butt and tell you, you're the best thing ever. But and I know that you didn't put the work in. Until guys do the work, it's just hard to really believe. And that's with Mac. Mac's like, I've just done the work. I've done the work every day for 3 years, and I believe in the work, and the guys are confident based on the work, and he'll be just fine. Yep.
Eric, and then the last one for Austin.
I'm on the call because I'm doing some games this weekend at US Bank Stadium, and I've been trying to ask the coaches about the challenges of playing indoors. I'm wondering how much outside time you've had, and if there are any concerns about your team playing their first live baseball in a while in such a weird environment.
I hadn't worried too much about it until you brought it up. So now I won't sleep. I'm kidding. Yeah, there's always a concern. Just like what the background's going to look like. I coach the outfitters, so naturally my first instincts are going to be is how do the hitters see the ball and how do the outfitters see the ball off of the bat? Is there a backdrop or whatnot? Turf is normally turf, although I don't know how this turf's going to play. We'll get a chance to take some ground balls on it beforehand, so we should be okay in that regard. The hard part is when you go from turf to dirt, especially if you go like the West Coast, right? You go out to the West Coast and it's like playing in a parking lot. They bakes all day and it's like they steamroll it and stuff and make it as hard and fast as possible. But that's a big adjustment for our guys. The infield wise, it should be fine. As long as we get a chance to go there and be on it beforehand, I think we should be okay. We have had a chance. We've been really fortunate. Everybody was kind of complaining when it was really cold here a couple weeks ago. And I'm the happiest guy ever because it's like, well, if we can just have winter during winter, we might actually get spring during spring. We don't need spring in January, but we do in March and April. So the last week we've been outside every day, a ton of fly ball, a ton of balls up, a ton of nice reps and reads. The guys are like really tired of practicing, and I'm doing everything I can to get them to hang on for like 2 more days. But they are tired of having practice meetings and doing that, and they're ready to go. So I think if you put us on like the surface of the moon right now, they would be we'd find a way to go play.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Austin, last one.
Coach, tough year with all Big Ten. I know you try to schedule tough in the non-conference, but what are going to be the pros and cons of playing an entire Big Ten schedule?
Well, the pro of it in my mind is that we do have the ability to play more games. And this sounds silly, but if you the fear of it is a lot of different conferences aren't testing the way that we're testing, right? So if you play non-conference and you saw what happened in the last couple of weeks, is you've seen a ton of COVID cancellations, right? So that was always the fear when they switched to conference only was can we protect the games that we get to have? And I think that makes sense from my standpoint. I don't agree with everything all the time, but that makes sense to me. So that's the positive. I think you're going to play really quality opponents every day. And if the goal for us is to be the best team that we can be at the end of the season, then we need to play really quality opponents as often as possible. So you're jumping in with both feet, and you're going to have to go and compete, and they all count. And so, I mean, there are certainly negatives that go along with it, but there's nothing you can do about it. So we're gonna go and manage it the best that we can. But I do think the positive of having a team that's battle tested and prepared for the postseason, if we're fortunate enough to get there, is a real positive. And you learn to play baseball at a high level when you're forced to play at a high level every day. And just like our pitching staff right now is really doing a good job. And so when an offensive player has a really poor at bat, there's no get out of jail free card. There's no like, well, you take a 2-1 fastball in the middle of the plate, you don't get another one. The at bat's just over. Just go sit down. And so that kind of idea extrapolated out over an entire season, I think does a lot for you, where you just hardens you. You have to play. Baseball is a game that you have to play in a certain fashion. You have to be able to do certain things. And if you don't do those, you just won't win if you're playing anybody worth a darn. And so we're going to play really good teams every day, and we're going to have to be good at those things. We'll get our butt kicked.